Hello, everybody. It looks like the intro was not running just right this morning, or this evening, I should say. So I decided let's just cut that off. Hello, everyone.
Hello, everybody. Good to have everybody here this evening. The intro was lagging this side too. So hey, best thing to do, just cut it.
It's funny. Sometimes Restream, the service we use, works really, really great. But we upload these things ahead of time, and sometimes their servers. It must be a lot of people streaming tonight or something.
But, yeah, totally.
Well, it looks like we got a few people rolling in right now. Let's see who's in the chat so far. We've got Mr. William Murfitt, Dave Smith. Let's see, who else do we have? Hello. Adrian, Andrew, welcome. So, this evening, we are going to be talking about some pretty exciting stuff, I think. We're going to be getting into intake systems. We're going to be getting into, fueling. What's the best option out there? Which one should you choose? And probably getting into all the stuff that's in between those subjects as well. And as usual, taking your questions during our Q&A segment. So hopefully you guys got some.
It all sounds very good. Unfortunately, for some reason, right now, I'm actually hearing everything you say twice over.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very interesting. I'm literally just listening to you giving your intro just there now. And now
okay.
I'm listening to myself. This is interesting. I'm not sure why I'm lagging like this. Hang on now. I think Billy figured it out. There we go.
Is that better?
Oh. That is so much better.
I wondered why you were giving me this blank stare like, what is that terrible noise?
Oh man, that was horrendous. I was like, what the hell? Yeah. Hello to everybody in the chat. Wow, these are all flying in. There's my favorite name ever in the chat. Hello, Colleen.
Oh man, of course. Today is just the day of technical issues because just as your sound got sorted out, my air compressor was like, you know what? I want to say some things too. And so it just kicked on in the background. That's why I muted myself just then. Today is a rough Sunday, y'all.
Yeah, I was like for a second, wait now, Cole's audio's gone.
He's just silently laughing. That's just how it is. I make the face, but nothing comes out.
Oh yeah, today is going. My apologies, everybody, if I'm sneezing and snotting. I have a little bit of a cold on me. It's not COVID. I swear, I don't have COVID. But hey-ho. I don't think you can catch it by the internet.
Well, I mean, we'll put it to the test, because if you're sick, there's literally no other sickness you can get except COVID these days. COVID. So, yeah. Oh man. Oh. Yeah. Yep. Oh, and we have Team Ballylock Classics as well in the chat. Welcome. Hello.
Oh,
good to see you. We've got quite a few YouTubers in here today. Adam Campion, William Murfitt. Hello.
Yeah. Hello, William. Oh, I didn't see you pop in there. And I see Patrick Callahan's in there as well. Hi, Patrick. It's great. We get to see all these regular names now. It's really cool. It's lovely seeing all these regular people that pop into the chat. Thank you guys, everybody who showed up. I really was terrible at publicizing this week's live stream. I don't deserve all the content that I get.
Yeah, get out of here. I'm going to kick you right now.
I wouldn't blame you. I wouldn't blame you at all. But hey, no, it's just life. Do you want me to? Will I just?
Yeah, just get out of here. Go and leave the dog. We want the dog.
Yeah, Arkham's over here. Hey, dude, what's the story? He's like not participating at the moment. He probably will in a while though. He's like sitting over there going, "Oh, not this again. Oh, we're not doing this. This is a weekly thing now. You never said this was going to happen all the time."
Why is he just sitting there talking to that box, that weird box? Like he's just making noises and.
Yeah, normally he's singing at least, but this just talking to this box about rubbish and laughing, that's really worrying.
Yeah, that's way too much. Dad, no happiness allowed. Well,
Oh,
I think that
yeah.
we might as well just get straight into it.
Why
You
not?
want to kick it off today, or you want me to?
Yeah, so I mean, you asked me there about a week or two ago, I think now, what will we
Hmm.
talk about? And I said, you know what, we haven't talked about fueling, or if we have, it's always been like a little bit of a side comment or something like that. And we did do like a whole section on ignition, so I thought, you know what, fueling is kind of
Hmm.
a perfectly good topic. And to be honest with you, I get questions about fueling all the time. So I think
Same.
it's no harm that we actually do kind of just have a bit of a conversation about it and, you know, surely spur on many thousand more questions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's always that way,
Which,
First, we get into, well, what should? I think the most common question is always, how do I tune my classic Mini? And that's just going into the
uh,
SU carburetors alone. Which why don't we just start with those? The common
yeah,
SU carb, and all its variations. So, uh, I'm sure you can answer this, but why don't you name every SU carburetor that was either factory on the Mini or a kind of like OEM plus kind of upgrade that people use? Do you think you can name all of them?
you devil.
Just put you right on the spot.
Yeah, you did. Wait till I think now. Well, I think we would start with H2. Would have
Hmm.
been the very, very first. I'm not sure. I don't think they ever did the H1. I don't think that ever got it onto a Mini. But I
No.
stand to be corrected on that. There's possible, but I'm pretty sure H1, H2 was the start. And then the next kind of iteration would have been twin H4s. That would have probably been the next iteration, and H4 around the same time.
Yep.
But I'm pretty sure we've seen H2 and twin HS2s. They were kind of the 998 Coopers would have got the HS2s.
Yep. And I'm
We
going to
never
pull up a picture
seen
of those while
twin
you're doing this.
H2s, I don't think. I'm not 100% on that, but I'm pretty sure we never seen twin H2s. I think it was started with
No.
H2s and then twin HS2s, twin H4s.
Hmm.
Then I'm not sure twin HS4s ever made it to the Mini. I think loads of people have used them from MGBs and all that sort of stuff. I'm not sure it ever was production fitted to a Mini. The
Interesting.
HS4 definitely did.
Yep. A single HS4, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. But I'm not sure twin HS4s ever made it in production.
Yeah, I don't remember it ever seeing twin HS4s on the car. Did Cooper S's come with a twin H4? Just a
Uh, Cooper S Production Works Rally had
Okay.
HS4s.
Okay.
So anything
Interesting.
that was, for the FIA homologated cars, because obviously
Hmm.
they had to produce, I can't remember what the number was, like 200 something production cars had to be produced with H4s, twin H4s, so that it could be brought into homologation or whatever way that works. I'm not a homologation expert, but I know for rallying, if you wanted H4s, it had to go into production. So not 100% sure.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because
So they
I've
may
seen
not.
those kind of pop up here and there, and I've seen them on cars. I always wondered if they were factory or not.
Yeah, as far as I know, you had to be able to buy them because in order to get FIA homologation, they
Hmm.
had to be on a production car sold to the public. So they would have done a limited number of or a limited run of, I presume they would have called them Mini Cooper S Works or something like that. Cars that
Hmm.
were sold. So, for example, you'll see like the reproductions, or you might even see some of the um, what Paddy Hopkirk cars or those kind of cars,
Oh
Renault
yeah.
Altanon,
Hmm.
and they would have all had H4s, and they would have been a production car because they were homologated in FIA, which is incidentally why we can then use that twin H4 carb in FIA Appendix K Motorsport. So
Oh,
the likes of
because
the
it's
cars
kind
you
of
see in
a
Goodwood and all that. It's
it's
a
like
homologated. It made it through homologation, even though it was rally homologation. They will allow them for circuit racing.
For those that don't know, what does homologation mean?
So basically, back in the day, if you wanted to enter, say, international rallying, which, you know, at the time the likes of the Monte Carlo, you would have had to enter what was called a homologated car. And a homologated car was where it was deemed to be a car of production. So when you were, say, BMC, and you knew you needed to compete against the world, well, you had to produce a road car that really was almost on the limits of being a road car, so that you could then bring it into motorsport and be fast in that car.
Right.
So that's kind of where Cooper S came from, because they knew they needed to build S's to, you know, be competitive. But then, in order to be even more competitive, then S Works would have been a thing. So when S Works became a thing, that they're like the super duper, the top of the line car that was sold. So
I see.
so I see
and
some of the comments coming up. It's only cheating if you get caught. Homologation is effectively cheating.
And for those of you who don't know, because I realize as I'm asking you to name all of these things, you know, putting you on the spot, of course, to start a quiz, even though you're all sniffly right now. The various different H's and 4s and 2s and all of these numbers that Paul's talking about, that we're talking about here, are various sizes of these carburetors. So I pulled up here. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. It's a photo of a dual HS2 setup, which is 2.25-inch size inlet HS carburetors. And so the various different numbers signify different sizes of these intakes. And then later on, there were different types of SU carburetors, like the HIF 38 and the HIF 44, which also corresponded to 1.5 inches or 1 3/4 size inlet. And the buildup of those carbs was a little bit different, but technologically speaking, they still had a float bowl. It just lived underneath. So you can kind of see the float bowls that live on the side of these two carbs. That's where your fuel goes in. And then the jet fires that fuel up into your carburetor, and it's sucked into your engine to do explosions. And the later carbs just moved that float bowl underneath the carb and made it a more consolidated unit, but still same kind of technology.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Like, yeah, that's it. So you've got your full range. You finished it out there with the HIF. That was kind of the last in the line. Now, the only differences was there was some HIF 38s fitted as well. Mini City E over here in Europe got a HIF 38. And then the likes of the Coopers, the early carb Coopers, they got the 44. So
yeah. A lot of people use the 44s as a performance upgrade too. So let's stop sharing the screen here. Go back.
Yeah, you now have the HIF T 44 fitted to yours.
Yep, T for turbo.
That designation, yeah, T for turbo, and it has some interest modifications. So yeah, pretty much the H series in SUs is what were used in the Mini, and there's loads of other series of carburetors, but the H series is what was used. SU H series predominantly through the whole production of Mini. And then the S series was the second kind of generation of the H series. So you had all the H series started, which we alluded to there, to start with the H2s and the H4s. And then the HS series, basically they changed the way the choke linkages worked. They changed the airflow paths inside the carburetors, and they changed the lengths and dimensions, so how wide the carburetor was, and loads of other little, you know, tweaks and twists and stuff.
Little fiddly things.
Yeah, generally speaking, they were a big evolution, and then they pretty much didn't have another evolution until the HIF, which was internal float bowl, which is what the IF stands for, which is integrating the float bowl inside the carburetor as opposed to having it on the edge.
Yep, and you guys can see here, this that I'm holding up is actually an HIF style carburetor, and the whole float bowl is this unit down at the bottom. Just for a little bit of a visual representation here. So this is the same, it's doing the same thing. It's just all underneath it and built a little bit differently. I personally like the H before the S series. I like the way that they look much more.
Absolutely.
The H, man, it's something about all the brass. It has this like kind of akin to a Weber carburetor. And
also the history it carries, because the H series originally were all handmade carburetors. There was no production line. There was no mechanical production line. So everything in the H series, not now, but any of the original production H series, if you could find a set that still exists. Incidentally, actually, the race Cooper S that we have in HRE, the one in our stable, the green one, it has an original set of H4s, which they have a beautiful story, which I might tell on a live one time when we go down and look at that car. They came from an Irish guy who bought them from the Works mini team in Dublin. So
that's super cool. I'd like to see that.
He passed them on to me when I was building that car, and the man has long since actually died. Well, he died 2 years ago now, but one of the very last conversations we had was him passing those carburetors on to me and letting me use them on that race car. So yeah, they have some nice history behind them, and any kind of H series originals all carry that kind of history with them. So especially if you can find twin early H series SUs, if you find original twin H series SUs, they were for a mini, and you can tell if they're for a mini or for another car, because the float poles were a very specific angle on the H series for a mini. So you can actually trace the lineage back of those carburetors, and they will most definitely either have been sold as a race modification from one of the Works factories or fitted to a Works mini. So it's one of those few things where if you know your onions with carburetors, you can tell very quickly whether a Works car is actually originally really a Works car, or whether it's a knockoff, replica or whatever.
That's really interesting. So the gentleman I'm doing this Cooper S rebuild for, he has a set of dual H4s, complete. They need some love. They're a little crusty, but they I'd be curious to kind of do a little bit of research on those. It would be really cool to put those on that Cooper S engine.
Absolutely, and it'd be nice to see the fact that was an American car and some of the history behind it. I reckon he probably bought them from somebody who supplied, or that family bought them from somebody who supplied Works upgrades, I imagine.
Oh, maybe.
It'd be interesting to hear the history behind them. I would reckon his car probably originally came with twin H2s. I imagine.
I bet you're right. I think it was twin HS2s. Fairly certain.
Because they were I think nearly all of the Coopers that went to the American market had that twin HS2s.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That feels accurate. It actually looks like we have him here. Ahart's Classic Mini Garage. Just going to give a little plug here real quick. He's got a YouTube channel as well where you can follow the disassembly and repair of the actual body, suspension, all that stuff, because you guys know I'm doing the engine, but there's a whole car that goes with it. So if you want to follow the car's progress, head over and subscribe. He's got
at some stage he'll have to get him on here, and he can tell us all the history of the car and tell us all about the exploits, because that all sounds very interesting to me.
Yeah, I agree. We'll have to see if he'd be up for it.
Twist his arm.
Oh man,
the good old Irish charm. You said I'll email him. We'll get him on.
You send the email, and he won't say no to you. I mean, who could say no to you?
Yeah, that Irish charm. I'll make him a cup of tea. It'll be grand.
Oh, good.
Well, I don't know. But there you go. I'll get myself in too deep now, because I'll end up having to come and visit when this engine and this car is up and running. And that's what's going to happen.
Well, you might as well. I mean, when you ship the heads back,
it'll be cheaper if I put them in my luggage, right?
Yep. I'll just buy you a ticket to the U.S. and you can just put it in your carry-on. You're dragging it across.
I have a lot of shoes.
Yeah, what is in this? It feels like it's made out of lead. Actually, it's 2 pieces of cast iron. Get it right.
Just like cut like the tops off pairs of boots, and stick them on as rocker covers. I'd be like, yeah, they're my platform boots.
Yeah, my steel toe protection boots I need to wear on the airplane.
I'm from Ireland. That's how we do it.
Yeah, we do weird stuff here. It's no big deal.
Safety first and all that.
Oh man. Well, so
yeah.
kind of circling back to the SU carburetor stuff. A lot of people are kind of they look at these carbs and carbs in general, because obviously most cars are using fuel injection, which we'll probably get into a little bit later. These old SU carburetors, people are looking at them and like, how in the hell do these things work? They feel like it's like witchcraft. What's going on? Needles. What's a jets? Like float bowls. All these things. Maybe we could run through just kind of like the anatomy of an SU carburetor real quick, and like, what does everything do on it? I'll hold it up as you talk about it, unless you have one over there.
Yeah, not at all. The only thing I have is a beautiful dog. Don't have one.
That's almost better.
No, he's no SU today. He does know how they work, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he hangs out with you, so it's not surprising.
Yeah. They all know how they work. God love them. Yeah. So basically, on an SU, like the most traditional parts of an SU that you'll all probably recognize is that there's a valve which allows air in, which is the butterfly. So that's that guy there. Yeah. So that's traditional, and that basically is an on-off switch. So when you put your foot in the throttle, it opens that. And the only other thing then that you've got to get in there to make the engine run is fuel. And the British, in their phenomenal engineering cleverness, decided that they would make that fuel delivery system what they call infinitely variable. So we'll talk about Webers in a while, and Webers have jets in them, and those jets have orifices, which are holes, and they, depending on the size of that hole, that meters how much fuel can be let in with the air. That is very limited, because depending on what RPM the engine is at, it depends on how much fuel is going to get in. And at very low speed, the fuel is not going to get in very well, and at very high speed, it may not get in very well. So generally speaking, the likes of a Weber can only work very well at a very specific load and speed.
Mm-hmm.
The wonderful people who designed the SU, they said, well, we can make this much more complex, and we can not only vary how much the hole in the jet is. In other words, at low speed, the hole in the jet can be very, very small, and at high speed, the hole in the jet can be very, very large. But we will also change how open the carburetor actually is. Now, that's not to say the throttle valve decides how much air can get in and out, but the thing Cole is lifting up and down is the piston, and that changes how open the carburetor is. It's actually changing the venturi size.
Mm-hmm.
Now, without getting into trying to explain venturis to you, there's a absolutely epic YouTube channel called Smarter Every Day.
Yes.
And we've talked about Smarter Every Day. And if you guys don't know what a venturi is, you head over to Smarter Every Day and check out his channel. And he has like the simplest, most easy to understand explanation of how carburation works that I have seen on the internet. And that's not under stating that at all.
No, that is quite literally the best place to understand how the Venturi works, and how carburetors work on a technical and general level. Like it will follow and kind of help you understand it. And honestly, it will make tuning your SU carb considerably easier once you know what's going on,
what's actually happening. Yeah. And the SU basically after that then just has that added layer that it can change the size of the venturi, and it can also change the size of the fixed orifice. So in this stage, it's a variable orifice. So to be honest with you, it was the closest thing you could get to fuel injection mechanically, other than actually mechanical fuel injection, obviously. But the closest thing to it. And to be honest with you, I don't think enough credit is actually placed in the annals of history as to how phenomenally well engineered an SU carburetor is, because they nailed it with simplicity as well. And there is no mechanical moving parts to make all this work. It simply uses airflow and vacuum, which is phenomenal, to be honest with you.
It's quite incredible. And one of the commenters actually make a really good point. SUs were ahead in the game, which is, you know, I think what you're alluding to, but they say that they're great design for turbos. And I completely agree. Like, by using and relying on that airflow, you can tie a carburetor's behavior and mechanical nature to your airflow and your airflow requirements, which is pretty cool.
It's actually amazing. I remember early in my days of tuning cars and learning about SUs, and actually just sitting reading the book, being mind blown that somebody was smart enough to sit down with a sheet of paper and a pencil, because that's where this started. It didn't start off in Fusion 360 or, you know, SolidWorks. This started off on a sheet of paper, a pencil, and probably a slide rule. And
Yeah,
some guy
and a lot
got
of math.
from, and a lot of math, got from that grey stuff upstairs to that aluminium thing you held up there, and it works, and it works phenomenally well. So yeah, people often ask me, and I'm gonna hit this one straight off. What is this? If there was one carburetor you could only have, or sorry, there was only one fuel system that you could have for a Mini, you're never going to be able to pick anything else again. It's going to be this forevermore. What would you pick? And I would still pick the SU carburetor, absolutely, all day long.
There's, you know, you can go down these roads of complexity, and like, sure, there are things now, fuel injection, that, you know, arguably can deliver fuel in a more efficient and a good way. But to get to that point of it working really well, the amount of energy and time you have to put in is so much greater than a carburetor that gets you to a arguably very, very close to perfect behavior. The only thing I would say in relation to the SU carb, something that I wish that they had, and I think you probably know what I'm going to suggest on this, but it's an accelerator pump. I wish that there was just a small accelerator pump or a variable accelerator pump inside these that would, when pressing the pedal, inject a small amount of fuel into the throat of the carburetor, so that you don't get that kind of lag that can happen with some SU carburetors, depending on the ones you're using or how it's tuned.
Yeah. Truthfully speaking, that is probably the single. I don't know what the word. I don't want to say biggest problem, because it wouldn't be fair to say that, but it probably is the one thing that it lacks. And
shortcoming.
You know,
maybe.
I remember. Yeah, it's a shortcoming, definitely. I know I looked a few times at would it be possible to incorporate an aftermarket type of this, and I talked to a few old timers who, you know, did a lot of tuning on these. They said, look, we tried it back in the day, but the only place you can actually put it is pre the throttle flap, and if you're pre the throttle flap, then you're going to be where between the piston and the throttle flap, the venturi and the piston and the throttle flap, and it just becomes a complete another nightmare. If you spray it before that again, well, it just washes against the side of the piston and falls out of the carburetor. So yeah, I think it was a technical impossibility. I don't know that they overlooked it. I don't know. I think it might have just been they looked at it and went, this is just not doable because of the particularity of the design. Because if you look at pretty much any other carburetor or any other style of carburetor, they all incorporate that throttle jack pump, or the you know, and SUs suffer in two places with this, as you said, when you jack the throttle open hard or in cold starting. One of the beautiful things that a throttle pump is you can give the car 3 or 4 pumps of the throttle and get a shot of neat fuel down your intake, which is just magic for starting anything, other than a really mildly tuned engine.
Yeah.
Like one of the things we have, I mentioned the race FIA Cooper we have. Like I literally have a canister full of petrol that's pumped up under pressure, and we open the bonnet and literally spray raw fuel down the carbs to start them, because they're nearly impossible to start on those SUs otherwise. You will get them to go, but you'll wind them and wind them and wind them and wind them and wind them before they'll fire,
Yeah, that's part of the reason you'll see, something that these SUs also used, as well as the Webers. That was a manual choke. So while a choke is not the same as an accelerator pump, it can help alleviate a little bit of that behavior by forcing an over-rich mixture into your engine. Good Lord, couldn't think of the word engine there for a minute. Brain completely went out the window. And to help you get started in the cold and things like that. But even still, you're right. It doesn't solve for those cold or aggressively tuned engines that just need fuel and don't have it when you're turning it over.
I seen a good one in their mini performance. Just put it in there. Reese Fish. The Reese Fish carburetor. I think it's very unfair to put the word carburetor after Reese Fish. I'd rather
I'm not familiar with these.
The Reese Fish bucket would be a better explanation, I think, or the Reese Fish fuel dump, I think, would be another pretty accurate terminology. The Reese Fish carburetor. If you've got the David Vizard Chin the A series book, I presume.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it's up to the right there.
Have a peruse through it there tonight when you're doing no more, and you'll see it. It's kind of in the first couple of pages of carburation. David Vizard talks a little bit about it. They were, excuse me, a carburetor of the late 60s, early 70s for tuning, and they have a very interesting design. But basically, they were effectively a valve that just turned fuel on or off. That's pretty much all they were. And air on or off, and the metering and measuring of this, not really a thing.
Oh my God, that's great.
But I'm being unfair to it. I am being unfair to it. But
what were they running on? What vehicles were they? Did they ever?
They were basically like an aftermarket carb you could buy to tune your car. Basically, that was the thing. I don't know if they were ever OE on anything. I'm not sure any manufacturer could ever manage to get them to work. OE, but yeah, they were an aftermarket
OE minus thing.
Yeah, OE minus, exactly. Oh, you've got an SU that works really well and meters fuel. Why don't you buy this? It's a Reese Fish. It'll just fuck fuel in.
Oh man!
You have a huge tank of fuel at the back of your house that you need to get rid of. Buy a Reese Fish carburetor. It will do that in a moment.
Oh, that's great.
I imagine that was the adverts at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it seems reasonable based on what you're telling me right now. Well, metering fuel is actually an interesting topic, and something that we could probably dive into a little bit here. With the lifting of that flow, or the piston inside the carburetor, what's happening is it's lifting, allowing more air in, but it's also lifting up and changing how deep a needle is sitting into a jet. And so the needle they have various different profiles. So you might have one that's really fat up at the top and kind of narrows down and gets really small at the bottom, or stays pretty linear across them. Some of them are very dramatic. Some of them are very linear and flat, but still all tapering down. And that is what's determining your mixture at various different RPMs. They call them steps on the needle. But as that needle is lifting, it's obviously smaller and smaller. So it's allowing more and more fuel to get past it out of that jet. The Venturi is sucking that fuel through, and it's going into your engine to deliver power. And that's something pretty cool about the SU carburetors is, I guess it's cool and not cool if you don't have a lot of needles hanging around and you're trying to tune your car. But,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
pretty neat.
I mean, one of the lovely beauties I think about that, for tuning, is if you actually get the hang of it, you can pretty much just get a really lean needle, like the old AAA needle or one of those, and
Mhm.
pretty much then after that you can. I'm not going to say it's easy because it definitely is not easy. It requires
Mhm.
phenomenal amount of patience and skill, but you can basically make any jet you want with a really lean needle and
Yeah.
some time and some sandpaper, which was another kind of cool thing. Whereas and this kind of goes back to why would I pick an SU over all the other ones? I mean, if you going to buy a Weber, you got to buy all of the jets and all of the metering components because I mean, you could make them, but like you would need to buy a very specific set of micro drills and be
Yep.
really,
Which I did
really
do
good at
this.
using them. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, you went down this
Yeah.
road. God love you.
Yeah. With the supercharger.
Um, oh
We'll get into it when we get to the Weber stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, you kind of on SUs. Yeah, that is the joy. However, honestly, I'm with you. With a very simple selection of needles, and generally speaking, what I try and tell everybody to do is to find the baseline needle, which you can find on Cole's website. Little plug for yourself. He's got a
Go ahead and put
needle
this
comparison
in
chart. Stick that in there. I literally use, by the way, that a couple of times every month. Anytime I'm offering advice to people, I always because I'll say, "Oh, what needle have you got right now?" And they'll tell me, and I'll whip open my laptop, go into your needle chart, put the needle they have in, and then pick out one leaner and one richer from there, and
Thank you for the plug.
no, it's a fantastic tool, and the fact that you have that up there and it works so well and so easily and so efficiently and for free. I mean, you deserve the plug. You deserve the plug a million times. So it's a wonderful resource that I hope you manage to keep up there for a long time more. And if you don't, I want it. You can send it to
Yeah,
me
I'll
in
send you the
HTML
website.
format.
Oh yeah. It's a fun tool
But
to build too, like I like all that charting stuff. So it's like, let's data. Let's show it.
but it's phenomenal. Actually, just the other day, my Roland Road guy was like, "Okay, that needle is for that engine's a little bit." He just rang me, and I was like, "Look, here you go," and I was able to email him over a photograph of the different needles that we had in stock between me and him, and he was able to pick the one from that chart. He was like, "Oh,
Oh, that's
actually,
cool.
that one there, that's exactly the needle I need." So we were able to work it out. Like, so yeah, that is one of the brilliant resources of SUs. I mean, there's so much data out there. It's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We but so needles, like and let me tell you, there are boatloads of needles, but I think, Paul, you hit the nail on the head, or the needle on the head. The if you have some time and you want to get into it, it can be kind of fun. It's something called polishing your needle. But as I was about to say it, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get some crap for this. But anyway, you can polish your needle, in your free time, and
Now,
make the
just
tune.
be careful though, because you can polish your needle too much.
That's true. You don't want to. Yeah, you don't want to go blind, right? That's what it is.
Well, it's just you'll be really rich after it. That's the problem.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe we should.
Colleen Gentry left the chat.
Yeah. She's literally posted a comment, eek. Oh man. But yeah,
yes.
if you have an AFR gauge, you can use that to determine, okay, at 6,000 RPM, okay, maybe let's go down a little bit more. 4,000 RPM, I am way too lean. I don't have enough fuel at 4,000 RPM. That corresponds to a specific step on the needle. You polish that a little bit to open it up a little bit. and suddenly you're getting more fuel directly at that RPM level, and you continue to do this throughout the whole range of your power band, and suddenly you have an incredibly tuned Mini, or you're rich.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you in fairness have had great experience of this in recent years. So, you know, the proof is in the pudding in that, right? You did your own tuning on your turbo, and then you brought it to Rolling Road, and you were damn close. You were
I
damn
was
close.
very close. I was very, very close. The
I mean,
only thing I
would it have
could
been okay if you hadn't have brought it to Rolling Road? I think it probably would have been.
Yeah, actually it would have. I think I wouldn't have been making as much power as I did. But after sending it there, getting that reassurance, getting that measurable data is very, very cool. And I learned some really interesting information yesterday, actually, on my way up to Virginia about that tune. So my Rolling Road guy is he does Rolling Roads for a lot of my friends who race cars. And we were talking, and he actually turned up the boost a little bit more than 15. We kind of talked about it beforehand, so he didn't do this without my permission or anything. And apparently at some of the higher boost levels, we were getting close to 190 horsepower.
Whoa.
Yeah, which is pretty crazy. Obviously, I did not want to keep it at those levels. We ended up stabilizing at 15 PSI, but pretty cool knowing that.
Did he mention how fueling was up there?
It was... Yeah, it stuck around 11 on the AFR gauge, so it was kind of rich, but
nice and cold.
Yeah, except for melting the oil pressure gauge line. But aside from that, yes, it kept it very cold.
I would have loved to see what the exhaust gas temperature was right then. I would have loved to have seen at that horsepower.
Yeah, 400 million would probably be the temperature.
I'd say, yeah. I always, I remember years and years ago, going to a turbo drag meet where there was a couple of guys running pretty spicy turbo cars. Not necessarily a Mini, but there was one Mini there that was, just slightly north of 200 horsepower. And I remember he did a run. I can't even remember actually what the time was, but kind of irrelevant. It was fast. And when he came back in, we were like, dude, your bonnet. And he was like, what? And he had a carbon fiber bonnet on the car, and it was like completely, there was a hole melted in the carbon fiber bonnet completely the shape of the exhaust manifold.
Holy crap.
So what was the temperatures inside there?
Yeah, a few degrees hotter than hell.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. The surface of the sun around there somewhere, I imagine. There's an old school guy I talked to over the years. He was an ex. I can't remember the category now. They used to race turbo minis. No, Metro turbos. Oh, bloody hell! I cannot think. They had the kind of works Metro turbo engine in them. Oh man, I cannot think what the name of that genre of racing is. It's like there's a specific name because they like have a head gasket specifically made for them with like firing rings and all that. Somebody might pop it up in the chat for me because it's not coming to me right now. But yeah, they were racing in this particular category, and they had a battle with another car. I can't remember whether it was like an open track event or something like that, but they were racing this car, this turbo Metro. My God, words going away from me. They were racing this turbo Metro, and they had been like stuck up the backside. Group A, thank you very much, Mini Performance. Group A turbo Metro Group A. They were turbocharged, but he'd been stuck right up the backside of this. I can't remember what it was. It was like a Ford Sierra Cosworth or something like that. And he came back in for like, he pitted. That's what it was, because there was smoke inside the car. And he was like, we can't find where the smoke is coming from. And, like the pit crew were looking around. And then they realized that the smoke was coming from the dash, which was on fire because so much heat had come through the bulkhead. It turned the bulkhead red and it had ignited the dash and set the dash of the car on fire.
Oh my God. That's
the
incredible.
dash was literally melting down the back of the bulkhead. Like
the engine's not on fire, but there's smoke everywhere. What's happening?
Everywhere. The whole inside of the car was full of smoke. Yeah, the dash was melting down.
Oh my God.
But mini performance aspects of heli racing, no, but I think it was some of the guys from the Isle of Man, the Manx racing team. I think that's who it was. It was those guys I was talking to. I'm pretty sure it was the Manx guys, and they were telling me this story. It was at Goodwood in one of the revival meetings, and we got talking at this bar one night, and the guy was like, "Oh, I used to race," the usual story, and this guy was blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I don't know. I can't corroborate the story, but it sounded very plausible to me.
Oh, well, I can tell you it does get hot, like without a doubt. The whole engine, everything, the side mount exhaust manifold, like all of it definitely gets hot. It's something that I'm probably going to have to battle with in the summer. It gets hot here in North Carolina. And
oh yeah,
we shall see. I'm curious if I'm either going to have to turn the boost down a little bit or run a supplementary radiator, something like that, or maybe I'll use it as an excuse for meth injection or something. Who knows?
Yeah. into your carburetor.
Yeah. Just right into it.
Yeah, not into the air vent of the car. No.
No. No, I don't need to cool I can stay hot. I don't mind being hot. I'll just take the glass panels out of the Mark I doors so that I get more air.
Yeah, will be good. Just cut the whole door top off and make them like barn doors.
Oh yeah, perfect. A buddy of mine here actually has an early Mark I. The guy I actually went up to Virginia with yesterday, and he has spin-on like hand knob things on the bottom rail of the Mark I windows. And so he unscrews those and the whole rail just pops out for the summer. And so
whoa.
It's
nice.
Super clever, super neat. He did it. He's had the car since he was in high school. And like, I'm like, oh man, I should do that. I should do that.
I love it. How awesome that he has the car since he was in high school. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, his dad was a British car mechanic. Him growing up, he's a little bit older than me, and not much, but yeah, he basically taught me, the majority of what I know about minis. Whenever I have an issue or like some problem with the car, I usually bounce the idea off of him. He helps me solve a lot of my mini issues.
Oh man, so. That's an epic story. That's really cool. Yeah. So yeah, I suppose on our chat, the notion about fuel injection and then Webers, I suppose. Do we want to do fuel injection then Webers, or will we stay with carburetors, talk Weber, and then talk fuel injection?
Maybe let's talk Webers first. Let's
stay on carbs. So yeah, you had some experience with Webers.
Yeah, I'll tell you my experience because mine is probably a little bit more limited than yours. So my initial introduction to Webers was with my VMAX Supercharged kit, and then all of the kind of woes that I ran into, probably a lot to do with my experience with Webers, but also the kind of nature of them in general. But Webers have a very different style of fueling in comparison to the SU Carb. They still use this kind of concept of the Venturi to pull fuel into the throats of the carb. DCOE, gosh, I should remember this. It's an Italian acronym that I have just completely forgotten. Maybe somebody in the comments can post that up, what DCOE stands for. But basically, you have these dual ports on most of the Webers that you guys are probably familiar with, a DCOE 40 and a DCOE 45. These are referring to the size of the throats of the two carbs, or the two throats of the carburetor. And then there are jets, all internal inside this Weber. One jet that determines the idle, one jet that determines the fueling at low RPM, another one that determines fueling at upper RPMs, and then a fuel atomizer that determines how the fuel is, like, what's the word? Air rating is the word that's coming to mind, but that's not what it is. Maybe you can help me out here.
Yeah. So yeah. On the DCOE, I'm pretty sure it's something to do with dual horizontal or something like that, right? It's something
Yeah,
to do
the
with
Italian
that.
words for that.
Yeah, exactly. So the fact that there is two chokes and the carb always sits in a horizontal direction, and it's something like that. Ballylock Classic just put in the Italian for it. My Italian is terrible, but I'm sure, given your heritage there, you'll be able to read that right out for us.
And tell us. I'll get the stupid battery replaced on my camera.
Yeah, that's good. He said Team Ballylock Classic also says, he didn't Google it. He knew that Italian off the top of his head, which I completely and utterly believe. Yeah, straight
Here we
on.
go. I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna read it. All right.
Go.
Doppio corpo orizzontale e. I don't know why there's another E in there, but
sounds good.
Hopefully that was close. If there's anyone Italian in here who can correct me, well, I don't know how you correct me over chat, but just say thumbs up or thumbs down.
Nice. Yeah. Don't actually correct me, for the love of God. Yeah. Don't do it. So yeah, like, your explanation is perfect. I mean, that's pretty much exactly what DCOEs are. They have an internal flow pole, so the flow pole doesn't hang on the side; it sits in the middle between the two chokes. And they have a number of drillings. Yeah. They have two primary drillings, which they've got the primary circuit, the main jet, and the idle circuit, the idle jet. And it gets complex after that, because Italians, being Italians, wanted to have something, I suppose, similar to the SU. They wanted to have the ability that as the carburetor moved through the load path of the engine and also the RPM, which is the air need or the air requirement, they wanted to be able to change the way the fuel metered across that. Their methodology of doing it is and this is being fair, it's cruder. It's much more crude than the methodology of the SU. The SU is much more, it's a much more finessed way of doing the exact same thing. However, in its crudeness, it creates a characteristic that has been beneficial for tuning over the years. Now, you will very rarely ever hear about Weber and economy or Weber and emissions, good emissions, spoke about in the same sentence. Very, 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 very rarely. And typically speaking, the minute you move from something like the SU to a more cruder metering system like the way the Weber works, you're going to immediately sacrifice economy, and you're going to sacrifice also somewhere in the load rev range and the nice running of that engine. Over the years, of course, that has become something that we've become akin to and attuned to, and we actually associated it as a good thing. If you think back to the early days of Ferrari and its production, the sound that a Ferrari made, one half of everything to do with the sound it made was to do with its fuel system, which was the Webers, and it made it run a very specific way. And if you were born in the time before Ferrari and then grew into Ferrari, this sound you just associated with Ferrari. You just associated with power and prestige and beauty that Ferrari had. However, if you actually delve down deep into it and look at it, it was actually, you look at how a Ferrari engine actually ran, you'd be really disappointed, because it was really, really terribly unfuel efficient. It was forever fouling its spark plugs and drove horribly at every point other than one sweet spot, which was, somewhere between 5,500 and 7,000 RPM. So, if you put that down on paper, you'd be like, we'll never sell this car.
Yeah.
This is crazy. This is ridiculous. But if you did, well, Italians are phenomenal at doing what they do, and they made a beautiful car. One of the funny things, sorry, I'm going all way off topic here in every different direction, but somebody recently, I think it was in Germany, took a very early Ferrari engine and fuel injected it, and the engine itself produced almost double the horsepower and also was ridiculously economical.
Really?
So, yeah, like ridiculously, because the engineering in the actual engine itself was phenomenal. The engine itself was really a brilliant piece of engineering, and was capable of burning fuel phenomenally well. But the fuel delivery system that they used, not so much. But
Oh,
there you go.
yeah.
So Weber, yeah.
And it kind of, with this whole nature of like fueling working really well at specific RPMs with the Weber, it's like you can get a jet, a main jet that's going to deliver fuel at a certain rate throughout the metering of the carb is going to deliver that fuel, and it's just going to do its thing. But as a result, you're starting to lose out in other portions of that power band. And that was something I ran into with the VMAX kit. Like, I could not get this car to run well at lower RPMs. Once you got into that power, and once you got into moving, it was like perfect. You could get fueling good. It would still be a little rich, but overall it would do its thing. With the lower RPMs, that I got even deep down, and Stuart, bless his heart, like he was on WhatsApp with me for hours and hours working through this stuff. I cannot say enough good stuff about him. And he would spend so much time with me. Like, okay, he even sent me a little set of those micro drills that you were talking about, sent me the smallest jets that were available. And then we just moved up the jet sizes by drilling them out one by one by one by one, to kind of address the fueling issues I was having. And I mean, unfortunately, it didn't. I never could get it worked out. I imagine if I lived near him, it probably would have been different. But that's kind of the nature of Weber.
To be honest with you, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, people come to me all the time, in the last 15 years, and they will have like their Weber carbureted Mini and say, this just, it doesn't pull well here, it doesn't pull well there, or it stutters here, it stammers there. And I'll go for a test drive and I'll come back and say, that's running really well. And they'll be like, what? What do you mean it's running really well? And I was like, that's as well as that's going to run. And I have a really brilliant Weber guy in Ireland who does roll and road work for me. And about 4 or 5 years ago, he kind of sat me down and explained this to me in no uncertain terms. He said, look, Paul, Webers are an item of performance. And you should never buy a Weber unless you are buying them with that in mind immediately. They were Weber DCOE Webers were never ever intended for street cars. They just weren't. Have they been fitted to street cars all over the world? Yes. Did Ferrari use them in their street cars? Yes, they did. But look at anybody who has ever used them all over. I mean, you can get into any Weber powered Ferrari and sit in traffic lights and try and get that thing to move off smoothly off the line and not scream the hell off the engine or not have to absolutely slip the crap out of the clutch. You're not going to do it. Like, some of the best drivers in the world, that's what they'll tell you, because that's just how they are. And he sat me down and explained that, said, look, if you can be okay with that, then the Weber is the right choice for you. If all out power and all out performance is what you want, then the Weber is the right tool for that job. But if you want something that is going to be perform well, have street manners, and have a modicum of economy, then SUs or fuel injection is the carburetor for you, and you are completely wasting your money putting a Weber on there.
Yep.
So
there's a reason that you look at a lot of these performance minis that are still raced today, and they are running Webers. That performance aligns, at least with my personal experience with them, which is that Webers, you tune them for a specific power band, you tune them for a specific purpose to align exactly with what you're saying, Paul, and that's where you drive them, and you freaking hammer them when they just do what they need to do. But
hilariously, enjoy them when they're crap.
Yeah,
I was trying to explain this to somebody as well. There's enjoyment to be had out of making a car drive when it doesn't want to, with that terrible, crappy off throttle, off kilterness. You can find pleasure in that, because you can say, this is how this is a Weber. This is what I actually want, And it sounds crazy to say that. I mean, somebody said to me recently, I had a Mini with a 310 duration cam on the road, and someone said to me, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't have a 310 duration cam Mini on the road." Well, I'm going to tell you one step even further. It was a 998 with a 310 duration cam. And people say, you couldn't have that as a street car. You can't have that as a street driven car. I did, because what did I want? I absolutely wanted that kick in the arse at 4,500 revs, and I wanted it to spin to 9,000. And in order to do that, I needed a Weber and a 998. And was that thing a dog in traffic? Yep. Did a policeman once tell me my engine was about to fall out of my car? Yes, that definitely happened. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I loved starting it up in the morning and smelling raw fuel kicking out the exhaust, and it banging and farting and not wanting to run right. I loved it. I loved that element of it.
Yeah.
Well, because every race car I ever listened to in the paddock or in the park, that's what it sounded like. And now my car sounded like that. So that's what I wanted, So
now you had a race car by default.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how my brain was working. Now, if you want, but that's the thing. So, if we boil everything we've talked about over the last hour down in carburation, you can have something that sounds amazing, makes great power, but it's not going to be economical, and it's probably not going to be reliable. And that's going to be, if you go back to all of our chats, that you're going to get that. So carburation is always a compromise, and you need to know what you want. And if you know what you want, then you can choose the carburetor in a flash. It's so easy. It's so simple. If you look at how your Turbo Mini works compared to your supercharged Mini, you're going to actually find that the supercharger really wasn't the crux of your problem. The crux of your problem was the fueling system.
100%.
Realistic.
100%.
And
without a shadow of a doubt.
Going turbo, I personally think turbo is a much better application for what you want from your Mini, because you want power and you need drivability. That's the two things. That's what you want. And turbo just gives you that in spades. But then couple that with a brilliant carburetor like the HIF 44, and all of a sudden you start getting street ability, you get some economy even, and you get power.
Economy,
relatively speaking. Relatively speaking to your Weber powered supercharged Mini, I'd like to have seen the numbers on that one.
As it's just dumping fuel into my cylinder.
6 miles to the gallon, maybe.
Yeah. I think that's totally accurate. Like and there are compromises with carburation. Like a lot of times I'll get people saying my Mini just doesn't feel like my modern car, whatever it is, and it never will. Like the behavior of one of
try and make it that.
Exactly. If you really want to get it as close to a modern car as possible, fuel injection is probably the route you need to take. If you want something simple that runs quite well, that does the job and is enjoyable, but with the lens of the fact that this car is not, it's not a modern car, then stick with an SU. They're simple, they work great, they are awesome.
It's you know what I mean. To conclude carburation, that is exactly the thing. If you if you are buying a Mini, ask yourself, or you have a Mini and you're tuning it, ask yourself the question, what is a Mini to you? And
Mm.
if it is the form, if it is that box with wheels on the corner and those quirky door handles and those funny windows and all of that, then and only then can you make the decision that a fuel injected engine is probably actually the way you want to go, because you care about what your car looks like. You don't care about the sound it makes or how the engine runs or what it is. But if you're somebody who says, "Oh, a Mini is quintessentially that car that burbles up the road and sounds a bit weird when it's cold and blah 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 blah," all of those things that we quintessentially associate with carburation, then you've got to think that's the way you want to go. Like, a very good friend of mine recently sold his 1970s carbureted Mini and bought an MPI. One of the, I don't know, did MPIs ever make it to the States? I don't think they did.
They didn't,
The fuel
no.
injected ones. No. So he bought one of these MPIs and he was like, it's great. It starts right up and it looks exactly like a Mini and blah, 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 blah. But, it's missing something. And I said, it's missing exactly that character. It's missing the character you associate with a Mini. And then when he realized that, yes, that burble and that induction noise and all of that was character that he associated with a Mini and was losing that in fuel injection, then he realized, what it is. And I think there's so many people that do that the other way around, that they take a Mini that runs really nicely and they tune the crap out of it because they hear about everyone tuning their Mini, and then they realize, this isn't what I want. This is
Yeah,
horrible. It's
I
not
want
nice to
the car to
drive, and
run right.
it runs really noisy. And I brought it to the tuner, and he told me that's about as good as it's going to run.
You're like, what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But then that is a great argument for, we're kind of like making fuel injection out to be like almost a neutering of the car, which isn't necessarily always the
No,
case. I think that the MPI, SPI setups were more about the reliability of the engine and kind of getting you down the road in a Mini. But modern fuel injection systems used by quite a few different people are really quite cool. With the Mini, you're still kind of looking at something called throttle body based fuel injection. Up until now, there's been a few things in development. I still don't think that they're out yet, but you don't have direct fuel injection, which would be firing fuel directly into the cylinders. So you have something called throttle body fuel injection, where you have an injector that sits where the carburetor used to sit, in most cases, and that is controlled by an ECU, a computer. You have a higher fuel pressure coming from your tank in the back with a return, so that excess pressure can be pushed off, and that goes back into your tank. So you have this kind of circulating thing happening. And all of that fueling is metered and determined by sensors in your exhaust, as well as the timing and the amount of spin that you're having on your engine, kind of boiled down into its root pieces. And so as a result, you get really, really great fuel delivery and fuel management across the entire fuel band. But you forego a lot of the kind of quirks of the Mini in favor of making this engine run as absolutely perfect as it possibly can, which is kind of like that Ferrari you were talking about earlier. They swap it over to fuel injection,
yeah,
double the
absolutely.
power, super efficient, same thing. So
Yeah, so I suppose when we talk about fuel injection for Minis, we do have to talk about the elephant that's in the room when it comes to fuel injection Minis, and that is, Minis have also a quirk that some of us are familiar with, and maybe not everybody is, but they are what we call a Siamese ported engine. And that means that they share inlets. So the truth is, if they share an inlet, that means cylinder 1 and 2 share one inlet, and cylinder 2 and 3, 3 and 4 share an inlet. Typically, on a modern engine, each cylinder has its own inlet, and you can put a fuel injector in that inlet spot.
On each one.
Unfortunately, exactly, for each cylinder. So you can have an injector per cylinder. On a Mini, unfortunately, that's not possible. So you have to have one injector for two cylinders, which affects a thing called the duty cycle of the injector. In other words, how long that injector is on versus being off. Now, I have no interest in getting deep into this because, to be honest with you, there's people out there with far more knowledge on this subject than I have. It's something that I understand myself, but have I got the ability to explain that across? I probably don't, and that's being truly and directly honest. I do understand the limitations it creates, and one of the really big problems with it is that the fueling, again, has to be a little bit, I suppose, compromised. So you can do the two types. As you said, throttle body injection, which is where the injectors are actually in the throttle body, which is very much like the SPI. You single point or dual point throttle body injection, or you can have a manifold injection, which is what the MPI had, which is multi-point injection. They had an injector for both cylinders, but always there seems to be a compromise. One of the big problems with fuel injection and minis is the minute you go from very standard running to performance orientated running. Once you do that, believe it or not, one of the biggest problems with fuel injection is how it atomizes the fuel.
Yes.
An injector does a brilliant job of atomizing fuel. It turns it into a mist really very well. Unfortunately, the A series engine and the characteristics created by Siamese ports is not very partial to very finely atomized fuel. So the result in that is you can actually get a mixture that doesn't completely burn. And a mixture that doesn't completely burn turns out to be a lean mixture. And we've talked before about lean mixtures on this channel and the effects they can have on how an engine runs and what it can cause in an engine. So I suppose the thing to note about injection is, and yes, I probably sometimes talk about fuel injection as not a performance orientated modification to a Mini. And that's unfair to fuel injection because there's lots of fuel injected minis out there that are very high performance and run very, very well. However, it is not a straightforward system. Now, fuel injection by and large is not straightforward. And it is a world of, well, put it this way. If you came to me and said, I'm learning minis and I want to make it a performance mini, or I'm learning minis and I want to make a really reliable street mini, neither of those two genres would I say to you fuel injection is a good option. Neither of them I would. But if you told me, do you know what, Paul, I have a really reliable performance tune mini that I would like to get more fuel economy out of and better performance, I would say start exploring fuel injection. That is the next place to go there. That would be kind of how I would sum up fuel injection.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that's actually really just the result of, given the cars weren't really fuel injected that long, or at least didn't have a method of fuel injection that was easily tunable. You don't have a lot of options for fuel injection, but aside from going a very custom route, there are companies out there like Specialist Components that have an ECU tune and an ECU and the kit that you can buy, but there aren't many others out there that are doing this, and as a result, I think there's room to grow in the pre-built kit world, or go down the route of buying all of this stuff yourself, individual components, making it work together. One of the people that's in this group actually is going down that road right now. Turbo Cooper Sport. He's got a Heltec ECU and throttle body injection, and he's going to be dealing with a lot of that custom stuff soon. Not that he hasn't already. He very much has, but that's the kind of reality of it. It's a custom thing. It's something you have to put time and energy into, and it's not going to be simple like an SU would be, but by a large margin.
I think that is probably the most honest answer to it. The truth with fuel injection is exactly that. I think there might only be one company making a bolt-on kit. Would I be right for the Mini? Is there? I don't know anyone else.
I mean, the only other one that you could kind of argue is semi like that is the injection ECU kit from, I'm sorry, not injection, um, ignition only kit ECU kit from MED.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
not fuel injection. You're still using a
No
car.
fuel injection.
It's just, yeah.
Yeah. So to me, until we see more competition in that market, I'll find it very hard to say out straight that there's a bolt-on kit out there that you could just buy and fit on and say that it's going to work. I know I see there Turbo Cooper Sport has in there SC are the only people, and that's the only people I know that do a fuel injection system that is bolt on. And I'll be honest, and I'm sure Specialist Components won't mind me saying this, it wouldn't be for the faint of hearted. I certainly wouldn't be encouraging a customer of mine who, has done basic work on his Mini to bolt on a fuel injection system like that. And when I say basic enough stuff, like I know plenty of my customers that I would have no hesitation whatsoever saying, buy a new SU carburetor from one of the big vendors. It's 2 bolts, 2 cables, and 2 pipes.
You're off to the races.
And you're off the races, and your Mini will run better straight away, because it's running an old janky carburetor which is worn out. And I know I could say that to a customer, but there is absolutely no way I could do that in the fuel injection world at the moment. I wouldn't dare.
Totally agree with that. Totally agree.
In fact, being absolutely honest, if a customer came to me in my business and said, Paul, I want a fuel injected engine on my Mini, I would have to take a very long, hard moment to decide whether I felt comfortable with being able to provide that service. Which, I don't know if that says a lot or not, but I would struggle to say that that's something I could hand out there straight away.
Well, it's the difference between all right, yes, both of us know that you could do it and you could do it quite well, but will you be doing it to the standard you want to be doing to provide to customers? And long term, are you going to want to and be able to support this in a way that you are comfortable with? So,
and that's the truth. I don't think I could stand behind it. I actually don't. Now, I'm very interested in it, and I am very interested in seeing how Turbo Cooper Sports system comes out, because I personally think that road he's going down with the likes of that ECU is a much more complex but a far better system. Like those Haltech ECUs are phenomenal. They are a proper piece of engineering, and of the fuel injection systems I have seen out there in the past, any of the ones that have been good that I have thought, they look like they will work well, they're expensive as all heck.
Yep. It gets up there quick, and it's not
really quick.
It's the tuning, it's the time spent.
But even it's even the quality of the injectors, the quality of the sensors, all of that. It has to be good.
Absolutely. Well,
yeah.
So it looks like I think that we've actually been talking about this intake and stuff system for intake systems for a little bit now, and we have a few people who wanted to ask us some questions, and I think now is a perfect time to move into the Q&A segment. So for those of you who haven't been here before for Q&A, we do this for the last portion of the chat, and just to kind of give you guys all the info, we are going to do our best to answer every question that comes in. Sometimes we get quite a lot of questions, and so the way that we divide this up is if you put in a super chat, those questions are guaranteed an answer, and we appreciate that. That helps us support these live chats and live streams in the future. But as I said, we're going to do our best to answer every question that comes in, and with that, let's move into the Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I have been watching the chat kind of rolling by here, and it has absolutely been busy as all heck, which is great. I love to see that. In fact, I think we hit the first 100 messages in like 30 minutes into the video, which is interesting. So thank you very much, everybody who has joined in. And as I said, you do seem to be, you're really keen on this topic. So we might have to revisit it maybe again and go a bit deeper maybe the next time.
Yeah,
And
maybe
talk,
pick one of them.
we might,
dive deeper.
yeah, let's do one and go deeper and deeper. Yeah, absolutely. As Cole said, yeah, we're going to do our best to answer all these questions. But yeah, I did see somebody there said, "What super chat?" Super chat, you'll see it as a button beside your normal chat button, and it allows you to donate to this live stream, and you can donate a small amount of money. It's a $sign, yes, exactly, and it allows you to donate a small amount of money, which helps us. In fairness, myself and Cole, not trying to bandy this one around or anything, but it is fair to say it. We both fund the Restream software that allows us to be here, which, believe it or not, guys, is not cheap. And we've been putting all the super chats that we get towards being able to fund another year of it. So we do really greatly appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. There's a question that just rolled in from Mini Performance. This one's good. Alex Hart asks, can a Mini Cooper run on diesel? And if you don't know, there's a little backstory to this. He was hanging out with Mr. Alex Toon and filled up one of his minis with diesel by mistake because the diesel nozzle apparently fit in there. I'm going to go with no. A Mini cannot run on diesel well.
There was the E-Series engine, though, which I believe was an A-Series engine with a fuel injection head or diesel cylinder head on it. So,
That's interesting. Did the head just like come straight up against the pistons? I mean, that seems like a lot of compression for an A-Series, says the guy with 15.
I reckon. Yeah, I reckon there was some interesting lumps of metal in there as pistons. All right, I don't think it ever made it into the Mini.
I can't imagine why.
A diesel Mini. There's a few people, in fairness, who have toyed with it. I've seen a few of them over the years, but I haven't seen anyone that I would say is OE standard.
No.
But yeah.
Mr.
Alrighty.
Mini Garage has a good one too. What would be the best SU carb on a Mini to autocross? I have an opinion, but I think I want to reserve my opinion and hear what you have to say on this one. I'm real curious.
All right, I'm going to say, are we talking about carburation only? Is it?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would say if it's carburation only, I would go SU for autocross. Mm-hmm. And the reason why, my understanding of autocross from the Irish perspective, is that it is on very loose surfaces, and trying to modulate the throttle to keep traction all the time. I personally would see an SU working much better in that world than a Weber, because Webers are very on or off, and they don't like rapid throttle modulation. In other words, coming on and off the throttle quickly. They don't like that.
I think I would agree with that. And to piggyback, I would probably say of the SU carburetors, I'd probably want to run like a dual HS2, something like that, where you have a more even distribution of fuel and those smaller throats on the throttles to kind of keep the power and kind of get rid of the, not totally, but kind of take away some of the issues you have with the lack of an accelerator pump. So, those smaller inlets with, fuel being delivered a little bit more quickly to those different Siamese ports lets you have that power lower in the RPM range, which I think would be beneficial in an autocross environment.
Yeah, I completely agree. That twin HS2s would work really, really well. Or, arguably speaking, the HIF 44 could work very well there as well. But I think you would probably have a little more top end from the twin HS2s than you would from the HIF 44. So, yeah, I would be inclined to say that. Yeah, I would agree. That's if I was building an autocross car and that's what I could have, then that's what I would go with. Obviously, regulations might affect it.
Yeah, rules around the grouping. Luckily, in the
Yeah.
U.S., a lot of the autocross stuff that happens here is not. They don't have a lot of the kind of like very very specific historic race classes, especially around a
Yeah, yeah,
mini.
yeah,
Normally, they're just like, oh, that's an old car. You do whatever you want, but you're in the old car class. Okay,
yeah.
guys,
Cheers, thanks, dudes.
thanks.
Uh,
Oh,
People are
well,
asking what the doggo's name is. That's Arkham.
oh yes, very cute pup. You
Arkham,
have a T-shirt too
Arkham,
available with with.
Arkham has his own T-shirt. He does, yeah. He knows his name too, don't you, dude? You saying hello to the camera? It's up there.
It's
If
like
it made if I
time.
could make the camera make the sound of a bird, he would look directly at all of you.
That's great.
Yeah, he has a bit of a thing for birds, don't you?
So,
He's just gonna
hey
go sleep
guys,
now.
this is from JT Clark, and I'm
Okay.
going to throw it up on the screen here. Hey guys, would you recommend a Mini as a first car, and which year would you say to go for? Um, I'm happy to start this one.
Yeah, go.
Okay. So I would say that I think if you like working on a car, if you want to learn how to, fix things, keep things running, maintain cars, I think a Mini is a really, really great first car. If you're not really into getting your hands dirty and kind of tinkering on stuff, I don't know that it's the right choice. And with the caveat that it's not going to be like owning a modern car. It's most, you're going to have periods of time where you're going to get in, it's just going to go, you're going to have a great time. But there are going to be periods where you're just, dang it, the ball joints have gone bad. Dang it, the wheel bearings are bad. I need to replace those. And those intervals come a little bit more frequently than a modern car would. So it depends on what you're willing to do, from my perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Look, I'm gonna wonder what your age range is. I mean, if you're a young car enthusiast, I'm like, go for it. Get a Mini and learn like we did. I started with a Mini. A lot of people I know started with Minis, and exactly what you say, Cole, is the fact. But when you're young and full of energy and all the rest of it, I mean, who doesn't want to go out in the evening time and attach their ball joints again so that they can drive to work tomorrow?
Yeah.
In the rain and the cold and the wind.
Yeah, I could be sitting in my living room watching Netflix, or I could have my hands covered in grease, cuts all over my hands because
All of my hands cut. Yeah.
Yeah.
And all I'll be able to do is go to work tomorrow. Yeah.
Yes.
But remember this, you'll be going to work in your Mini. And that's where
Yes.
it's all about. You may not make it to work, but you'll get some of the way there and you will be in your Mini.
I will say, actually, if you get a Mini for a first car, depending on where you are in the world, we call it AAA here. It's just a roadside assistance service. I used to be of the mindset, get the tools, keep the tools in the car and like fix it if something breaks down. I have long since shifted away from that because laying on the side of the road, changing something, fixing something, it sucks. And like a AAA membership in the US is like $100 or something for a year. And you can get your car towed back to your garage. You get it towed to the mechanic, and instead you're working on the car and getting it fixed at home where it's comfortable. And get an Uber to work that day.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Now look, at the end of the day, someone said to me recently, I want to buy a car. What's the most reliable car I can buy? And the truth is, even modern motor vehicles, they all break down. Okay.
Absolutely.
You just have to you just drive down your and see how many mechanic shops there is. If there's a bunch of mechanic shops, that's because they're in business. And the only reason they're in business is because it's fixing cars, right?
Yep.
So the day you start seeing mechanic shops closing down all over the country, ask what car just got invented and then go drive that. Yeah. Because that'll be your level one. But until that day, all cars break down. It just depends on whether you can work on them. Minis are old, they are old tech, and are they reliable? You know what? Honestly, if they're maintained properly, they're no less reliable than any other vehicle. If
Yeah.
they're maintained properly. but you got to maintain them properly. And there's a lot of hocus pocus out there. That's one of the big problems. JT says he's 18. If you're a car nut, JT, and you're 18, the only problem you're going to have, and the only reason I would advise you not to buy a Mini, is depending on where you are in the world, because you may well struggle with insurance.
Ooh,
A lot of
very
a lot of people around insurance don't like really old cars for insurance on young guys. But if you can get around insurance, and your parents probably, buy yourself a Mini. You'll love it.
All right. Why don't you pick the next question?
Okay, let me look here. Oh, well, go on then. Connor Chappell says, "Can I play the banjo, or is it just for show?" You're a devil, Connor. It is an instrument that I would absolutely love to be able to play well. I can make noise come out of it, and to me, that noise roughly sounds like music. But in reality, I'm not brilliant. I'm not a brilliant player, but I do, however, absolutely love the instrument and would love to be able to play it properly. Is that a fair answer to that question?
I think that's a fair answer. Yeah, I genuinely thought this is probably growing up in America and having a pretty America-centric view, as a result. But I thought that the banjo was actually kind of an American instrument. I didn't know that they were popular in other parts of the world. Maybe I'm learning something.
Yeah. So the banjo that you see behind me is what is called a tenor banjo, and it only has 4 strings, and that is traditionally an Irish instrument. So did we take it from America and make it our own, or did we bring it to America and you guys made it your own? Honestly, I don't know. I actually don't know the
You guys bringing
history,
it here.
but a tenor banjo that you see behind me is an Irish instrument, and if anybody in the chat hasn't heard a tenor banjo being played properly, if you go onto YouTube and type in tenor banjo and listen to some of that, it's some good music. It has some serious tunage, I think is the word to it. But tunage.
Oh, I bet it is. I bet it is the Irish bringing it over to the U.S. and then people.
I honestly don't know. I'll look it up and see. I don't know, because bluegrass is very definitely American. It's very, very definitely American, and I actually am unsure. I think it could be an American instrument that we finagled with, but
yeah, have to do some banjo after the live stream.
Yeah, we'll do some banjo history. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, here's a good question. Dan the car guy asks, am I right in thinking that you have to use a lead additive when you put modern fuel in a Mini? And this kind of relates to, so you're rebuilding some heads here soon for me. And if the Mini's head has not been rebuilt, it has factory valve seats that are not hardened. They kind of relied on the softness of lead in order to prevent damage to those valve seats over time. They kind of were just like, well, there's this leaded fuel that makes things a little bit more compliant. So if your head hasn't been rebuilt with hardened valve seats, then you probably would benefit from keeping a lead additive in there, especially with ethanol-based fuels, because they're pretty brutal.
Yep. Yeah, you're on it. Yeah, pretty much that's the story. So modern fuels have the problem where they wash the valve seat. And when you wash the valve seat, you basically take away anything there that can lubricate. Lubricate's probably not the perfect word, but it'll do in a pinch here. So exhausts in particular have an issue whereby what is going out in a Mini especially has a smut value to it. And when I say smut value, I mean it has a dirt, there's carbon in there. And carbon is one of the hardest materials in the world. That's what diamonds are made out of. So when you get carbon going between the valve seat and the valve, as they open and close, that carbon actually erodes the seat.
Yeah.
Now, exactly what Cole said is correct. When you have lead in there, the lead being that heavy, hard material, or sorry, heavy, soft material, tends to float down to the bottom and be the last thing that goes out, and then it catches the seat because the valve is right about to close. So what happens is the lead actually gets mushed into the seat and acts as a sort of sacrificial material which protects the seat, and it builds up this layer of kind of lead impregnated with carbon, and it makes kind of its own effective hardened seat, and it makes that seat last a long time. As you say, modern fuels, they have such a washing effect and they have such a cleansing effect that you get raw stainless steel hitting cast iron and then carbon between the two, and you get this kind of eroding effect. So if your Mini doesn't have hardened seats, then yes, an additive will help. To be honest with you, it won't fix the problem.
Mm-mm.
There's very few additives out there that I know of that actually really do a good job of replacing lead, unless they're actually lead adding additives, and they're illegal in most of the world now. So a hardened seat is the way to go if you're on modern fuels, and a lead additive will buy you time, but it won't solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Long term, I definitely would want to consider getting the head rebuilt, getting
Yeah,
upgraded stuff,
get a
especially if
hardened
you
seat.
keep the car a long time.
Yeah, look, we talked about those cylinder heads for you, and I mean, we didn't even it didn't even come up in the discussion. Hardened seats were going in those heads, and that was that.
Yep.
And the reason for that is quite simple, because you know your customer is putting this car on the road, and he wants reliability out of that engine, and hardened seats just make perfect sense for that.
Yep. And there isn't really any sort of performance detriment to adding hardened seats at this point in time. You know,
No, I mean,
at least not that I'm aware
If
of.
you ask if you asked me that question 10 years ago, I'd have said to you yes, because it would limit the size of valve I could put in the head. So, you know, 10 years ago, if I was building you an all-out performance cylinder head, I would have been considering 38 millimeter inlet valves and 31 millimeter exhaust valves. And in that instance, the seats are so big, there's no room for a hardened seat to go in there. Or if you could get a hardened seat in it, it'd fall right back out again. Um, but modern camshafts are so much more advanced, excuse me, that we get so much lift so early on that we now can come right down in valve sizes. So typically speaking, a performance cylinder head now on any road going engine could happily have a 30 millimeter exhaust and a 35 or 36 millimeter inlet and work absolutely just as well. And that leaves loads of room for a hardened seat. The only other place where we have to be careful with a hardened seat, and when we get your cylinder heads, this is something that we'll be checking, is how close the valves are actually already together. Unfortunately, minis, being what they are and produced the way they were, didn't always bore their valve guides in the same spot. And one of the problems there is some cylinder heads end up with the valve guides very close together, which means the valve seats are very close together, and there isn't enough material left for us to bore out, put a seat in, and it to have enough cast iron left to hold that seat in place. So they're kind of the kind of only downsides to hardened seats, I suppose.
I'm very curious to see about that. These are very early heads, and some of those valves were quite close together. Uh,
Yeah,
obviously, probably keep those stock valve size, but it'll be interesting to see. If you guys want to
yeah.
see heads rebuilt, you want to see that process, go subscribe to Paul's channel. If you're watching
Thanks.
this from mine,
Yeah,
it'll be very
we're
interesting stuff.
we're going to do some measuring, and there is tricks. We have a couple of tricks up our sleeve that we can put into place to sort of get around this a little bit, which I'll show you when it comes to looking at these heads. And we may well, hopefully, we're going to be able to do it, and hopefully there'll be enough material in there. But yeah, it can get tricky.
Fingers crossed.
All righty, let's have a look here. Let's answer another question. I'm going to go back up the list here a little bit. A couple came in early doors. I I want to see, is there a fuel injection one that we didn't answer earlier on? Sorry, a fuel system, one that we didn't answer earlier on. Wait, look here.
I thought I saw one, but maybe not.
Okay, maybe. I guess we'll just have a look at your questions. If you guys put a question in earlier on and we didn't answer it and you really want it, bang it in there now and we'll have a go at answering it. Because we scroll back through these messages, but when you're chatting away here and trying to keep the game afloat, it's hard to kind of read messages sometimes and see.
We do have one. This one's
Yeah.
another one from Will Ahart's Classic Mini Garage. I'll pop this up
Okay.
on the screen. What octane of unleaded 10% ethanol fuel should be used in a stock Mini? I think you're probably better off to try and focus on finding an ethanol-free fuel before kind of worrying about the octane level. There's something called RON, RON, level that is like the true octane measurement for fuel. And so like 98 octane fuel in the UK is a little bit different than 98 octane fuel in the US. But there are some parallels between premium gas in the two places based on the RON level. And so I would say that for most minis, to be totally honest with you, I ran regular in my car, 89 octane here in the US for years, never had a problem. With the turbo, I would only run the higher octane fuel, and if I can find it, find a 0% ethanol fuel.
Minis are brilliant. They are like in standard tune. They will pretty much run on a smelly rag. They're so easygoing for fuel. Knock and detonation is not an issue with them. However, as soon as you start bringing them up in their compression ratio, they get very picky as to the fuel octane level. And knowing the engine that you're building, you will be in a very easy position. You're not going for crazy compressions. You're not going for crazy cams. So yeah, you'll be able to run on literally just dead standard. Adding ethanol actually makes them more stable. So ethanol has a sort of a very calming effect on detonation because ethanol itself has a higher point of combustion, so it cools everything down.
That must be why so many of the guys on Mighty Car Mods have done so many ethanol based fueling systems. I think you can
Oh,
even
absolutely.
higher boost levels because of that lack of
Oh,
detonation fear.
years ago when we were racing and they weren't checking fuel, we used to absolutely pour ethanol into our fuel,
Wow.
because ethanol vaporizes much quicker than petrol. So that vaporization cools the mixture right down. I mean, anything that boils faster in atmosphere, produces colder mixture. So you get a colder mixture, you get more density, more power. And the sacrifices of fuel line and all of that sort of thing was well worth it for what we got. I did find that question. Dave Smith asked, is there a little button on the side of the SU that you can press to see if the mixture is running rich or lean? And that's a really good question because
Yeah.
early SUs very definitely do have that little button. And what that little button did, it's actually called a Venturi jack. And excuse me, this is my absolutely terrible pronunciation, Venturi jack. And in other words, it raises the Venturi slightly open. And to try and make this as simple as possible, what it actually did was it allowed slightly more air in than should be going through the Venturi. And if your mixture was running, if you were running too lean, the engine would stall because all of a sudden it would cut fuel. If you're running too rich, you would hear no effect or just slightly an increase in speed. So basically, what you were trying to do was you were trying to tune your engine to such a point that when you press that little button, that you heard very little effect in engine or just slightly starting to stall, and that told you that your engine was running close to lean or stoichiometric, very close to running the right fuel air mixture.
That's a very cool. That's a very cool explanation for it too, because I've seen diagrams of it. I had dual HS2s on my car when I first bought it, and it helped quite a bit. Playing with that little. I didn't know what it was called at the time, but quite
Venturi jack. Yeah. So it literally just lifts the Venturi. We did it for years and years, not knowing it, and we'd literally just have the air filters off, and you'd put your fingers in, and you'd literally just barely raise the Venturis, and it just gives you an indication as to how close you are. Basically, what happens is in SUs, there's a spot. It's almost, I don't know how to describe it other than it's like a hollow spot, where when you turn your fuel adjustment screws, there's like a 3/4 of a turn that you can do in either direction, and it has no effect on the way the engine is running. And if you don't have something monitoring the gases coming out the exhaust, you can't actually tell whether you're rich or lean. You're in this kind of hollow where the engine speed won't change, the way the engine sounds won't change, and you've got this like 1/4 of a turn and nothing is happening. And being able to lift the Venturis just slightly gave you a bit more of an indication as to where you are. So basically what you would do is you would turn, say, if you were in that spot where that 1/4 turn nothing was happening, you'd turn everything back a 1/4 turn, and you'd lift the Venturis a little, and if you heard the engine stalling, you knew you were close to lean there. If you turned it the 1/4 on and you lift the Venturis and nothing changed, you knew you were close to rich. And then you could kind of find the sweet spot in the middle. And it was a kind of an interesting, very mechanical way of tuning your SUs to, well, find that sweet spot, I suppose you might say.
Yeah. And now you kind of have the advent of AFR gauges, and if you have a sensor in your fuel, in your exhaust system,
Much better way of doing it.
Yeah, it's data driven. Oh,
Data. Yeah, the data world.
Here's an interesting question. Is there any benefit to ram air intakes? That's asked by Richard.
Okay.
I don't know that I have seen a benefit to a ram air intake on a Mini. You do end up, potentially getting colder air if you're getting it from, front of the car or something like that. But with a carb, colder air isn't always the best thing that you can get for a carb, especially in places like a cold climate. If you're, or even just a cool climate, if you're running somewhere where it's getting, close to 0 degrees Celsius, you can, by introducing colder air, you are now making your carb cooler, and can introduce things like carb icing, because you have this Venturi effect happening inside it that is just super cooling this air that's already cold from coming up in the front of the car. So that's one piece. I don't know that I've seen a benefit. I'm curious if you've seen a benefit.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I'm completely black and white on this. The only place where a cold air ram system is beneficial is in motorsport. It is the only place. And the use for it in motorsport is really simple. When you are racing another car, you will get into what's called their airstream. And generally speaking, the airstream coming off a racing car in front of you is warm. So it is actually hot, because you've got the engine in front, you've got the car itself is up to temperature, and you've got its radiator and fan blasting heat out. So when you get into that airstream, you're in effectively warmer air than the ambient air temperature around you. If you've got a ram air system on your car, you can move your car over slightly so that that ram air system is out in the clean, fresh air that is outside the car that's in front of you, which can give you more power, and that more power can shoot you past that car in front to get you ahead into the lead. That is pretty much the only place that I've ever seen a realistic benefit for a ram air system. Now, all of the disadvantages of a ram air system, as Cole has pointed out, in road cars, I would not recommend people use ram air systems because you drive cold air up into a carburetor, you're going to reduce atomization of fuel, which means the fuel itself will fall out of suspension. And if it falls out of suspension, it becomes liquid on the surfaces of the carburetor. It becomes liquid on the surface of the inlet manifold. It becomes liquid on the surfaces of the cylinder head. Liquid fuel that goes into an engine causes terrible damage because it washes the bores, so it takes oil off the bores. It washes the intake valve, so it takes oil off the intake valve. And it doesn't burn well. So you get huge high hydrocarbons, you get loss of power. It's not beneficial in those circumstances. If you have an all-out race motor that is at peak performance all the time, then a ram air system, if very well calibrated, may give you a slight amount more power because you've got colder, denser air. But by and large, the only performance benefit, in my opinion, to a ram air system is in overtaking. That's the only time I've ever seen it. And it's overtaking at the limit. Like if you're driving like that on the street, you're going to see blue flashing lights very soon.
Yep. Yeah. You're going to get a visit from your neighborhood police officer.
Your neighborhood police officer is going to get picky with you really quickly. So yeah, I think that's kind of ram air. I think they're sold as this, you're going to ram air like a turbocharger into the engine and make it more powerful, but it just doesn't work like that, guys. That's not fluid dynamics, unfortunately. I wish it was, but it isn't.
Yeah. But then on the flip side, if you apply the same the same thought process, doesn't actually translate to a fuel injected modern car, especially a direct injected fuel injected car, because you are now injecting atomized fuel directly into those cylinders. Yeah. So there's no situation where you'd have that fuel starting to congeal and collect in the intake path. And so
it'll work on those all day long. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So you see this benefit. That's why people with Golf GTIs or even just big trucks like me, have,
well, believe it or not, a ram air system on something like your turbocharged engine is a very different kettle of fish. Because you are looking for the coldest air you can possibly get. So if you're running a turbo motor, then ram air makes a lot of sense because if you can get that air from a colder place and get that into your turbo, then it will produce less heat when it's building up boost, which will mean your intercooler can work better, and a better working intercooler means denser air and more power, and also more reliability in your engine. So absolutely. Yeah, I mean, ram air, if we strictly speak about it for a carbureted engine, it doesn't make sense, as we said, unless it's racing, but there is places where it could make really a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it all boils down to what are the heat producing elements before the carburetor. And in a turbocharged setup, it's exactly as you say, Paul. That turbo is, the moment air goes into that turbo, it's getting hot. It's being condensed. Yeah. It's getting heat soak from the hot side of the turbo, and then everything you are doing is to cool that air down before it gets into the engine, so that you don't continuously introduce more and more heat, which it is going to happen no matter what. But you want to try and reduce that.
Completely. The Gentleman Mini Racer racing team says he wants to see a dueling banjos between me and you, Cole, like in the film Deliverance. I mean, you are from South Carolina. North Carolina.
North Carolina. Yeah, no, but see, the folks from Deliverance, weren't they in Tennessee?
Oh, there's got to be a swamp near you somewhere.
Actually, you know what? I just drove by a swamp today, so fair enough. All right. I think you might win the banjo contest. I'm like the least musically inclined. I'm very good at drumming on my steering wheel.
Oh yeah. Is that with your AirPods in or without?
Well,
do you ever see these it's a complete interjection, but people sing with AirPods, people sing without AirPods, and it's like what it sounds like when you have your AirPods in and you're singing
Yes.
along, and then the outside view. Oh man, I love
It's
that
just
so much.
completely terrible and off. Yeah, because you can't hear
Yeah.
yourself when you're listening to music in your
Oh yeah.
oh, buddy.
You're
Yeah.
welcome, Richard. No problem, dude. Anytime. All right, let me pick another question. I seen one come in here actually a minute ago. Oh, David was saying, David Yendel was asking offsetting the guides. I reckon, Dave, you're talking about the if you have a cylinder head which has an issue where the valves are too close together. Yeah, there's two things you can do. You can actually lower the combustion chambers, so we can actually machine down the combustion chambers, and basically what that does is it gets rid of the original seat effectively, and then, as you said, you can offset the guide slightly to bring them into a better position, and that gives you more material to be able then to put a valve guide in. But it is not for the faint of heart. It involves some very accurate measurement of the cylinder head. When I do these cylinder heads for coal, I actually have a sectioned cylinder head in my workshop, and I'll show you some images of the combustion chambers and how little material is actually in them from the factory. You can destroy a cylinder head in an instant if you do that kind of work without some very accurate measurements and being very, very careful, because there isn't as much material. Everyone thinks they're just a big solid chunk of cast iron, but they're actually 90% hollow. It's a lot of air inside them, and lots of tin films of cast iron all over the place.
Yeah, little ribs and things from the
Yeah.
and
There's not lots of. If Turbo Phil was in here now, he'd tell you about all the times he's broke through into combustion chambers, into waterways, and his life has been made a misery as a result of it.
Guess I'm getting a new head. Guess that's
Yeah, there's 40 hours gone. Yeah, bye.
Oh, here's a good question.
All right.
I ran into on my car. So
Oh yeah.
my car is a Mark One. HIF 44 versus a Mark One bulkhead. Will the float bowl clear without any modifications? So I have a thing here. I'm going to talk about the HIF 44 bigger carb. That single carb intake manifold kind of positions it in an awkward place. For early cars, you have the twin bolt subframes, which means that those twin bolt subframes, they just sit a little bit differently. They're a little bit tighter up in the car, and as a result, the HIF 44 doesn't always clear. So yes, you can fit it without modifying the bulkhead, but you need to do two things, in my experience. One is, at minimum, getting an adjustable engine steady, and just simply adjusting the engine steady so your engine leans a little bit far forward. If you go too far, you'll have issues with exhaust clearance and your shifter will feel kind of funny, but lean it forward a little bit. And then the spacer and isolator that goes in between the carb and the intake manifold, this can be skinnier. You can buy skinnier versions of this. The factory one is a big chunky boy. And you can get thinner ones that will pull the carb closer. So between those two things, you can fit that HIF 44 in there, but it is very tight. I think it's possible. You don't have to cut.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that. You can actually run them as well without that isolator at all in there. The isolator is there because the float bowl's integral, and you can get heat transmission basically coming back the inlet manifold into the carburetor, and it can cause fuel atomization problems and stuff like that. But realistically, in practice, unless you're doing huge, long, sustained, 200-kilometer drives or something like that, where the engine's at a real steady state for like 45 minutes, a half an hour, to be honest with you, as long as you're going up and down the revs and moving around, you can actually run them without it, and they'll do just fine with it. You might see a little bit of leaning out or that, but to be honest with you, we run minis so rich these days anyway, it doesn't tend to be an issue.
That actually reminds me, there is one other thing. When you pull that carb closer to the intake manifold, this carb doesn't have it, but there is a throttle
Oh yeah,
thingy. I forget what it's called.
yeah. It's a linkage. Yeah, that kind of it's the linkage. Yeah, it's a C-shaped linkage. Yeah.
Yes, yes. There's like a C-shaped linkage that has the throttle cable that goes through it. That will usually make contact with the intake manifold. So you might have to do just a little bit of filing down on the aluminum intake manifold. And
I think the actual name on it is a linkage quadrant. I think is what they call it.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah, yeah. We went all the way around there. C-shaped linkage, linkage thingy bobber quadrant.
Cable do that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we did say it was a rough Sunday, didn't we?
Yeah. Little struggle bus over here.
Oh yeah. We're getting there.
Well,
so yeah,
to the top of 2 hours. Why don't we both pick out our last 2 questions
cool.
for the live chat?
Let's do it. Let's look at. Let's pick another one there.
I've got one here. Dan the Car Guy says at Classic Mini DIY. Whoops. Yeah, there we go. Would you say a K&N filter is good for a road mini? Why don't you answer that one first?
Yeah, sure. K&N filters. Look, when you say is it good, I mean, will it add more power? It depends. It depends on what you had before that. If it's the replacement element that goes inside the standard air filter box, if you do nothing other than just put that in, you're going to struggle to notice any difference whatsoever. However, it is a serviceable item, so it can be washed and cleaned. So it's better for the environment because you're not buying paper element filters and throwing them away all the time. It's better for your pocket because it's a one shot, and then you can clean that filter all the time. If you modify the airbox and you put a bit more space in there and let more air in, then you will see a performance increase and a gain. I mean, to me, a performance air filter like K&N produce, if it's used correctly and maintained correctly, there's no disadvantages to one. That's kind of what I see.
Mm-hmm. I would resonate all of those things and just add that the only disadvantage that I have seen is that some people don't like the sound produced by the carburetor.
It's a very good point.
It kind of introduces a whistling type noise, which some people like. I personally am of the mindset of I enjoy the noise. I like that sound. It was kind of like a faux turbo when I didn't, when the car was naturally aspirated. But some people get irritated by it, and if you're at a constant, steady RPM for a long time, it can get a little droney, high-pitched drone.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I had a customer years ago who had a Lotus Elise with the Rover engine in it, the Rover K Series engine in it, and somebody convinced him to put a K&N filter in it, and he came to me really upset because he said, my lovely Lotus Elise has got this noise in it now that I can't fix. I don't know what it is. It sounds terrible. Will you take it for a drive? I drove it, came back and said, I don't hear any noise. It sounds great. I tell you what, I said, get in the passenger seat and we'll go for another drive. And you can tell me when you hear the noise. And of course, every time I gave the car wide open throttle, he's like, there it is. Can you hear it? Do you hear that noise? And it's like, that's intake noise. That's the intake noise of the engine. Well, it never made that noise before. And I was like, well, what did you change? And he's like, oh, we did this, and we put a K&N filter. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. We literally drove down to the local auto factors, bought an air filter for it, put it in it, and I was like, drive it now. Oh, you fixed it. Thank you so much. So, yeah, it is amazing how, and you're so right. I mean, I'm used to listening to minis with no filters at all for years and years and years. So to me, that's just the sound I associate with them. But you're absolutely right. Yeah. To some people, that could be a horrendous noise. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let's pick one last question then. Let's see. I see something about. Yeah. You can probably put this one up, Cole. I think user with a big long number 4272005.
Uh-huh.
Can you please cover a mini 5-speed gearbox assembly, pros and cons, etc.?
That's a good
So this
question.
is a really this question comes up a good bit. I get asked this quite often about mini 5-speed gearboxes. So there really is only 3 variations that I know of. Kent Auto Developments make one. Mini Spares make one, and another company don't make them anymore, but they're still available. Jack Knight. Um, so they're the ones that I know of, and I don't know if there's anybody else out there that's making one. If there is, you can put it in the comments there and enlighten me. But they're the 3 I know of. The only one that is streetable, in my opinion, would be the one that Mini Spares sell using the Evolution 5-speed gear kit.
Mhm.
And for a very standard to mildly tuned 1275, they're no less reliable than a normal 4-speed box.
An
I think
interesting choice of words.
that that would be that would be how I'd talk about them. Um, would I put one on a performance mini? The 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 KAD 5-speed gear kit for high performance engines works reasonably well, but it's for a very specific application. It's for an
Yeah.
application where you need to launch a mini off the line and then need higher gearing, basically.
Mm.
So if you've got an engine with a really big camshaft in it, they don't like going off the line with a very high ratio force gear. So you've got to have a much lower ratio force gear, and then that limits your top speed, because obviously the more lower first gear ratio is, then lower second has to be third, and then obviously fourth. So it limits your top speed. So you could use the KAD 5-speed box to give yourself a gear just to launch it off the line, and then you revert back to a normal 4-speed pattern, but with higher ratios. So that's that gear kit. The Jack Knight one, look, was it a good gear kit? When it was made brand new, it probably wasn't too bad at all. It was probably equivalent to the Mini Spares Evo gear kit. Now, unfortunately, any of them that I have seen have been badly worn and are getting to the stage where they're badly worn, and there's no replacement parts for them. So
Yep.
I don't recommend those to anybody, to be honest with you, unless you're restoring a Jack Knight equipped car. So if your car had a John Works Cooper engine with that 5-speed gearbox in it, then and you want to restore it, then that's okay. That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing. But to fit it into another car, no. So really, that leaves only the Mini Spares box. And as I said, if you want that extra gear, you
Mhm.
know, for thousands of pounds more, then go for it.
Lots of money.
It's a lot of money for not a lot of bang, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't think the Mini has ever struggled for another gear. I don't. I personally think that's a myth that's out there that people seem to think exists as a problem. Having driven Minis for over 20 years, a Mini that has the right engine and gearbox characteristics chose originally doesn't need another gear, and they don't struggle for another gear.
Yeah. At minimum, the you you can solve any issues that you might feel like you have with the top end using a different final drive. If you're having struggles
Totally
around
agree.
your car, it's most likely because your driving style is you're on highways, you're on high speed roads, and if that's the case, you might not need something that gets off the line like crazy fast. You can hop up a size in the final drive, and then suddenly you have a much more comfortable top end. So and it's considerably cheaper.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I bought one years ago myself. I had a um, early 2000s Cooper MPI. It was exactly 2000, actually. It was one of the first off the production line in 2000. Cooper MPI that I used to use as a daily driver, and I did a lot of motorway driving and the diff is very tall in those. It's a 2.7 diff. It's very, very tall. And I found it a dog in traffic. But I
Yeah.
loved how it drove on the motorway. So I said to myself, okay, I'll just shell out the money. I'll get the 5-speed gearbox, and then I won't lose any of that lovely motorway driving, but I'll gain back all the nice driving at low speed in traffic. Unfortunately, that's not what I got. And the reason I now understand is that the way the 5-speed gearbox works is fifth gear is an overdriven gear,
Mm-hmm.
fourth gear is 1-to-1. So what you actually get is you get a standard 4-speed mini gearbox with an overdrive in fifth. Now, you would think to yourself, well, then, okay, then you can give yourself a 2.9 ratio crown wheel and you'll still have the same cruise speed and you'll get it down. Unfortunately, you don't get enough. That's the problem. So the
Yeah.
juice is not worth the squeeze there. What they needed was a bigger overdrive. If it, as far as I know, it's 0.8 over, I think. They'd actually need it to be something like 0.7 or 0.6 over, but you just can't fit those gears in there. There isn't enough room to fit those gears in there.
Yeah.
And if you overdrove it, yeah, if you overdrove it that much, you just break the shafts off. So
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, it's too much of a compromise, in my opinion. I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. It's just why you don't see them out there. They're just I know a couple of people that have them, and they have them because they bought them off of somebody else that had one, and they've bought it and put it in their car, and then not too long after that, they end up selling it as well because it's too much of a limiting factor. You can't tune them, so like anything more than 85 horsepower becomes a problem for them, and torque is the big limiting factor. They do not want. They start to eat themselves very quickly, much over standard torque numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
yeah, I just
completely agree.
yeah, I
On
wish
every facet.
I wish we could say that they're a brilliant solution, but for a mini, I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. As you said, Cole, I mean, you can get. I would much prefer people spent a few bob on their cylinder head and got way more and a new camshaft and got more torque down low, and then you can put a bigger diff in your car and it'll pull like a train
Yeah.
down low and it'll run a bigger diff, no problem. I mean,
Great.
that's what I have done. Like when someone comes to me now and gives me that problem with an MPI and says, "Oh, I love the top end and I love being able to do 60 mile an hour, 2,000 RPM, but it's a dog down low in traffic." The very first thing I do is I suggest that they do a cylinder head job and they do a camshaft change. And invariably, anybody who agrees with that, it costs much less than the 5-speed gearbox. They get more power over the whole RPM range. The car drives better in traffic and pulls harder all the way up. So it's win-win, and it's so much better win than a 5-speed gearbox. Unfortunately, as much as I wish I could say that they were the way to go.
Yep. Yep. Well, that you guys have done it. You have spent 2 hours and 15 minutes wasting your time with us. I hope that
Oh wow, yeah, 2 hours and 15 minutes. Yeah, yeah. And another one. I'm gonna let them in on a little secret. Will I let them in on a little secret?
Oh, I don't know. Sure.
You it says you depends on what that secret is.
Yeah.
The,
What's the
at,
secret?
at the start of this video, I was like, "Oh, Cole, you know, I haven't done a very good job advertising this video, and maybe we won't have that many people in on this live chat. Like, so let's watch and see. And if there isn't that many people in, we'll just cut it short at like an hour and a half or something like that. And here we are, 2 hours and 15 minutes later, 15 minutes over what we normally say, huh?
Yeah, and
So
naturally,
yeah.
my battery pack died again.
Oh,
2 battery packs. Ugh.
2 battery packs. Yeah. It's not a good live stream if we don't manage to get through your second battery pack, Cole. That's my opinion.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. I need to get a plug in for that camera one day.
I have to say, as always, I know I say this every single time in every one of these live streams, but it is a pleasure. I always love them. It's something that, The time just flies for me. It really does. And thank you so much, everybody who gets in here and makes it what it is. As I said at the start, I see all those familiar names, and every week we come, or every month we come back here and do this. That list of familiar names is getting longer and longer, which is phenomenal, and it's great to see. So thank you so much for everybody who comes back in. A big shout out as well to Cole, number one, because without you, this wouldn't be possible. Cole, guys, makes this. He does all the restream work. He does all of that. I just click a link and it pops up. I also have to give a huge shout out to behind the scenes over here, Billy, who is making my end of this digital thing work. Billy, in fairness, goes uncharted and unthanked. I see him in the comments there, and he's making stuff happen over there all the time so that my camera produces video. I can guarantee you, the way I was feeling today, if I was the only one who was going to make this happen, there wouldn't have been a live stream for me this evening. But with these two guys here, they really do make this possible. So a huge thank you to you guys. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, it is a pleasure, and it is. While you say all these nice things, it is definitely, it would not be possible without you here to this conversation and having this whole live stream. So thank you as well.
It's all lies. I just make it all up on the spot, Cole. I'm just really convinced that.
Based on the comments on some of my older videos, I am also doing that. So, I
get those comments too.
Yeah, I think we all do. But I do want to mention that our next live stream is going to be on March 20th. So set that in your calendars. We'll post up a video thingy to set a reminder that way as well.
Before we go, we have something to talk about.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I nearly forgot. You nearly forgot. Our picture.
Yes.
Wow. Jeannie Mac, we've been so busy that we almost forgot to talk about this. And I have to talk about it because what a stunning mini. Oh my God.
Entire screen.
Here it comes.
Here it comes. Just keep waiting. Okay.
Yeah. Here we go. So this is Adrian. Adrian owns this mini. He's a 25-year-old guy from Germany. Is that right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Adrian has this mini, and he submitted it as part of an ongoing campaign that myself and Cole are running. So for anybody who wants to know, you either email me or Cole photographs of your mini and a little bit of information about it as well, please, if you have it, and send it to us. And at some stage, we will feature it as the sort of thumbnail picture for our live stream. And we're going to keep this up for as long as people keep submitting videos, I think. But wow, look at those pictures. Oh my God, man. They are so cool. I love that one. That is just a business. There's some really good ones there. So yeah,
especially is my favorite. Like what appears to be lifting it off of a shipping container or onto one. Like, how
do you not feel like that might be how your mini arrived in the States? Like,
oh, absolutely. It will in Canada, but yes, I probably probably was.
Yeah,
get it right, Paul.
So he imported this car from Gran Canaria. Is that right?
Yes, I think that's right. I pull up my notes here as I'm busy.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm reading the notes too.
Okay, good.
Yeah, he says it came from Gran Canaria. And
it's such a beautiful car.
Oh, it's just fab. It's gorgeous. That old English white with those wheels, that steering wheel, it's just quintessentially perfect, isn't it? That interior. I have to be honest. I love a retro modded standard mini, and by retro mod I mean just the real subtle stuff he's done, like the steering wheel, those seats, that interior. I just love that stuff. I just think that is one of the most beautiful sort of examples of a really cool retro standard modded mini, I think.
Yes, absolutely. This right here, this image really brings some feelings of just pure happiness, because this looks like the mountains of North Carolina as well. And so it's like,
we've
see
got a
this,
road like this in Ireland as well, and yeah, I completely agree.
you just feel it. You feel it. You're like, that is a good time, happiness, hitting some curvy roads, and trees are green, cars are running. So
he shouts out, I'm gonna pronounce this wrong. Adrian shouts out Stephen Boardmer.
oh yes.
Am I pronouncing that right?
Stephen Bodmer, I think.
Bodmer. Yeah, I think Bodmer. I think you're correct. Yeah.
Yep.
He did.
I'll leave
yeah.
it.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So it looks like he did the majority of these pictures, the engine assembly and all of these things. And we will post a comment in the description of these videos after they go live, get saved and everything. But he has a full website of the restoration, which is pretty cool.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough superlatives about it, but I thank you so much, Adrian, for sending this in to us, because I've never seen this mini before, and I feel like it's a privilege to see such a beautiful, and from such a young man. That really does my heart good. I love to hear about young guys doing up minis and being into them. It's fantastic. It gives me hope.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I, on the subject of fueling, with all of these things that we've been talking about on the video, like obviously we see that this car is running a single HS4, what looks like an HS4 carburetor here, and like that's the kind of simplicity that you can appreciate.
Lovely. It's lovely. I mean, I'd say this, and I might offend some people, but a lot of what I have seen over the years, when you get a younger guy into minis, it's straight away to build the Miglia race car, or something like that, which was me. I was 100% that guy. Like, I 100%, when I got into minis first, that's what I wanted, a racer on the road. And when I was at that period in my mini history, that's exactly what everybody else my kind of age and in the scene at that stage was interested in. Like, it was all about that. Like, could I get a set of RX Honda seats into my mini? Could I get the biggest radio system in there? You know what I mean? And it's just, to me, to see guys, and to see a younger guy interested in restoring a mini back to what it was, to its a former glory, with period specific modifications. Like you said, that carburetor, nice, lovely detail in that engine bay, lovely detail on the interior of the car. I just think it's brilliant. I think it's fantastic to see it, and it just it's makes you proud to be a part of the community that does stuff like that.
Yep, does the heart good. Yep.
Yeah. Also, just out of curiosity, he's also somebody who won a mug off of us. So on last week's live stream, so couldn't go to a better guy, in my opinion.
Very cool. That's super cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was very cool. Very cool. So yeah, big shout out to Adrian. Thank you so much for sending in that stuff, and what a lovely way to finish out our live stream.
Agreed. I just want to give everyone another thank you for tuning in, and we will be here later in March, and hope to see everybody here.
See you all later in March.
All right, later.